Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Hi, Rabta Wabla Atam, Za'achikam Yawam or Chagado, Charlotte, which is good evening. This is your brother Yawam from the JMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam, Kaya, Hamalakat Hashemayim, Kwara, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call Halayim La La, Banawi Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Chahakodash, Wamashana Lazakoni Nawa, Wamalakim, Shor Chagado, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means he exists, Bahasham. And the name Yahweh Shai delivers in double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Zatazapanya, this is Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 9, and it says, For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. All right, in which the Lord has ultimately returned the pure language, Halashwan Kodash, the holy tongue. It says that they may all call upon the name of the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, to serve him with one consent, in which all of the elect ultimately are in unison. All right, that's what that word for consent, in Hebrew, it goes into the Hebrew word shakam, which means shoulder to shoulder. So everybody in unison. All right, in which the elect ultimately are all going to be praising the name of the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, as pursuant to Proverbs 18 and 10, Psalms 124 and verse 8. All right, Bonsarat 17 and 10. The name is a very imperative part of the scriptures of this truth. All right, but you got guys, present day, of the circumcision. All right, the false prophets. All right, and this ultimately represents, those in off Israelite groups. All right, they're ultimately, here it is, um, they, the prophecy is pretty much popping off the pages, and yet, they're still pushing forth false doctrine. All right, saying, things like, the names don't matter, you can call the Lord, what you want, this, that, and the third, and so on and so forth. All right, but what we're seeing is as, things continue to spiral downhill, for those that are ultimately taking their constellation of this world. More falsehood is being pushed, more distractions is being pushed, and more gimmicks is being pushed. All right. So let's also get this. This is I'll get this first. This is Matthew Matthew chapter 24, and we'll get verse 5. And it says, For many shall, I'm gonna start at verse 3. It says, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Yahweh Shai answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Hamashayach, and shall deceive many. All right, in which, we in those times. All right, you have those of the circumcision. All right, again, in off Israelite groups that are ultimately saying that they are anointed. You see, but they're deceiving many. That they're leading many into ways of falsehood. Coming out with precept packets against those of which they say One West camps. You see, but specifically they're going into Great Millstone, in which they ultimately understand that from our elders and apostles on down, that the Spirit of the Lord is dealing with those of Great Millstone, from our elders and apostles on down. But again, as this place continues to go downhill, they're coming with gimmicks, and they're coming heavy with distractions. All right, hence Esau, he had they celebrating this 250 years of America. All right, and the Sakari, they pretty much was disbanded. All right, and then you also have other groups of the circumcision. They pretty much coming with the stuff that they're coming with. But I'm gonna get this. This is Isaiah chapter 19, and we'll get verse 1. That says, The burden of Egypt. All right, in which this word for burden goes into mash'ah, which is it's a load, it's a doom. All right, it's an utterance against this place. All right, because ultimately this place's sins have reached into the heavens. All right, or excuse me, to the skies. It says, but the burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. All right, in which that swift cloud ultimately is going into the fathership, in which the Lord Yahweh Shai is going to be riding upon. It says, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence. All right, in ancient Egypt, the idols and the stuff that those people confided in the ancient world, they were shown to be of no avail. Same present day. All right, which the distractions, the the gimmicks. All right, people ultimately put their trust in things that are very fickle and that are going to come to no benefit. All right, which ultimately again goes into those idols, and they're being moved. All right, because these things aren't ultimately rooted in truth. It says It says, "In the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it," and the mind, the inner workings of America, Babylon the Great, is essentially melting, while we speak, or pretty much present day. All right. But while that's going on, you're gonna have false prophets ultimately coming with the gimmicks. All right, you're gonna have Esau coming with that heavy deception. All right, as pursuant to pretty much the mindset in Matthew. Let me get this real fast. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 22, 3. It says, "But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness?" And going on to verse 22, it says, for pretty much the Lord speaking unto the elect, all right, to keep our eye single, to be focused, all right, and also to have an eye full of health, you see. But if one wants to have their eye focused on evil, distractions, gimmicks, so on and so forth, they're going to be filled with the darkness of this world. All right, and that's ultimately what Esau Edom pushes. All right, gimmicks, falsehood, all right, and distractions. All right, so let's get this right here. This is back to Isaiah chapter 19, and we'll get verse 2, and it says, "And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom." So it's a lot of infighting. All right, being that when kingdoms fall down, generally it's a lot of infighting, in which that happened in ancient Egypt. All right, and it's going to happen in its present day Egypt, America. It says, "And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards." And it's ultimately, what those of America, Babylon the Great is doing, and those that have ultimately taken the bag from Esau, Edom, all right, which represents, those of the circumcision that have sold out. Essentially, they're in that same mindset as well, so they're, doing, they're coming out with different falsehoods, all right, but it's not going to avail to anything, And pretty much what sparked this, lesson, pretty much, again, present day, you have those of the circumcision that are ultimately pushing forth heresies, all right, falsehoods, all right, combating, all right, the Hebrew language, all right. This is Bonsarat chapter 23, and we'll get verse 19, or let me see, Bonsarat 19 and verse 22. And it says, "The knowledge of wickedness is not wisdom, neither at any time the counsel of sinners prudence." All right, in which the land is supposed to be ruled and prudence and truth. All right, as pursuant to Bonsarat, the 10th chapter, roughly paraphrasing. All right, which is supposed to be ruled in prudence. All right, but yet, in these times, those that are currently ruling the world, all right, they're ruling it in wickedness. All right, and it has a season. All right, Job 14 and 5, Job 20 and 5. All right, the triumphant of the hypocrite is but for a moment, roughly paraphrasing. So being that they have that they're running on borrowed time, are they having to do things like verse 3, it says, "And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards." So ultimately, again, they're having to do more wickedness. All right, but it's gonna come to no avail, because this place has a specific amount of time to where it's gonna rule for. All right, but I'm gonna keep going into the Hebrew. All right, because again, I just want to touch on that, but we're in the time to where again, heresies, heavy heresies is coming out, falsehoods. All right, but again, one of those falsehoods that's being pushed is that we don't have the true Hebrew. But if that was the case, all right, so-called scholars, and I say so-called, you see, because to this world they're scholars, you see, but the wisdom of this world is foolish. All right, but nevertheless, to those that seek to the world for information, all right, they seek to the people like that. All right, and with those people that are ultimately in those different fields, so to speak, all right, they have a word called edenics. All right, and edenics goes back to the study of words, pretty much to where how it goes back to the Garden of Eden. All right, in which the language that was spoken in the Garden of Eden, all right, is known as the Hebrew, Ibar Yah. All right, in which again, all the languages pretty much was confounded. Every language is a broken derivative of Hebrew, but you have a pure form of Hebrew as we got in Zephaniah the 3rd chapter. So let's also get this. This is Zephaniah, or excuse me, Baba Ashiath chapter 11, and we'll get verse 1, and it says, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech." All right, and again, hence the term Edenics. It says, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they began to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do." All right, which that was in that time in the ancient world, you see, but it's a present Tower of Babel, all right, so to speak, that's being developed currently, the modern day NWO. So it says, verse 7, "Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech," in which the Alahayim were dispatched, to ultimately confound the languages. And that's where you get the different derivatives of the Hebrew. So it says, verse 8, "So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babal, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad scattered them abroad upon the face of all the earth." So Babal goes into confusion, all right, because we got something that was pure. When you think about pure water, all right, it's pure water, it's clean, all right, it's purified, all right. But when you go into this word for Babal, it says confusion, confusion by mixing. Or a better example would be say alcohol or juice or something like that. You could have pure juice, or you could have like a certain percentage of like alcohol. All right. But then when you put that alcohol or that juice in comparison to a language, all right, because I'm going to go into this root word, it says balal, because babal comes from balal. All right. And what balal means is to mix, mingle, confuse. All right. And it says, let me go back up or go into this. It says to pour over. It says to pour together. It says to stain, to soil. All right. And it says poured over with. It says to sprinkle, to wet, to moisten. All right. Now let me go back because there was some more information. It says to moisten with water. It says to fade away right here, to fade away. So when you take, pure juice or pure alcohol, all right, or a certain percentage, all right, when you water it down, all right, it becomes less pure and less strong. That's why I said in Bon Sirach, the 1st chapter right here, it says Bon Sirach 1:1, skipping to the point. It says, wherefore, so let me find it. It says, wherefore let me entreat you to read it with favor and attention, and to pardon us wherein we may seem to come short of some words which we have labored to interpret. For the same things uttered in Hebrew and translated into another tongue have not the same force in them. And not only these things, but the law itself and the prophets and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language. So that's why we have to go into the Hebrew and to the Greek. All right, but ultimately going back to the point to where it says it don't have the same force, all right, because the pure Hebrew is stronger. All right, so being that all the other languages is pretty much derivatives, all right, the strength has faded away. It's been watered down. All right, so I'm gonna get one more, and that'll be it. This is Yashaya Isaiah chapter 19, and we'll get verse 18, and it says, "In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, and swear to the Lord of hosts. One shall be called the city of destruction." All right, and which the language of Canaan is talking about the Hebrew. All right, in which the Canaanites, all right, in secular history, they was known as the Phoenicians. All right, if we Google the Phoenician language, all right, it's gonna go back to the characters, which was the Paleo Hebrew, or which scholars call it that Paleo Hebrew too, but that really goes back to Halashwan Kodash, the Holy Tongue, the Hebrew, the language of our fathers. But pretty much the point, the language of Canaan is talking about the Hebrew. So just wanted to go into that, because we do indeed have the true Hebrew, all right, and the Lord has returned it unto us, all right, in which the most important part of the language is the Lord's name, as we got in Zephaniah 3:9. So I don't want to Zaza Banaya Palo. That was a beautiful edification through the Spirit. Well, I don't want to Zaza Atamiash like Latawab Lord as well. You have a good night. Watch Shalom Lakan, which is peace into you all. Shalom, shalom.